pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 1870 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran. I spent 2 years over there in Vietnam. It only took me about 2 weeks to see the truth of the situation over there. When I saw what was really going on, I had one of those moments. Like in the movie Dr. Strangelove, that was titled, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. I had one of those moments about 2 weeks after my arrival in Vietnam. I could see it for what it was. It was an unusual situation, to put it nicely. At that moment, I decided to don't worry about the war and all the things going on. My primary concern was, number one, to stay alive, number two, to enjoy it as much as I could, number three, to put all my money into this savings program they provided for all the military personnel in Vietnam, and that was a 10% deal. That's right. You put your money in this savings program, and it would yield 10% interest. And I said, what a deal, what a deal. And I was thinking, as Jerry Clower once said, there is a banker in Jackson, Mississippi, what wants me to get in on one of those deals. And I did it. Both my years in Vietnam, I put all my pay into this program. You didn't really need any money in Vietnam. They provided you with everything. Food, clothing, entertainment, whatever you needed. They would give it to you so you didn't need to spend money. When it was all over with, I had enough money in that account to buy some land over in eastern North Carolina that turned out to change my life for the better. So I don't have too many complaints about Vietnam. I did not let it get into my mind and drive me crazy. Plus, I made some money while I was over there. Being in that state of mind, I began to watch things and see things. And after a while, I became a little selfish. It looked like the entire government of the United States had put on this war in Vietnam for my edification and entertainment. I got to see things I never saw at a firepower demonstration back here in the States. All sorts of aircraft, all sorts of weapons, all sorts of tactics, you name it, they were doing it in Vietnam. The Air Force provided me with a great deal of entertainment. I used to get a kick out of watching those highly sophisticated and expensive F-4s flying in low and slow and dropping snake and nape on the enemy. Every time I would see that, I would ask myself the question, why in the world are they using those expensive aircraft to drop bombs on guerrillas in the middle of a jungle? Why not use the old faithful Sky Raiders? They were propeller-driven aircraft that would do a job on the VC and stay there all day. They flew slow enough so that the pilots could most times pick out the friendlies from the enemies. Too many times I saw those big jets fly in and drop the bombs in the wrong place. When that would happen, many times the facts flying overhead would say something like, well, they're going to have to leave now. They're out of fuel and they're out of ideas. The old Sky Raiders were so slow you could always pick out the enemy. Didn't happen too often where they would hit the wrong people. It was the South Vietnamese pilots flying Sky Raiders that dropped the napalm on the girl who got burned and became an iconic image for the world. Another exhibit the Air Force put on, I feel, for my benefit, was the B-52 arc lights. If you've ever seen a B-52 arc light loosed on a real live enemy, not a demonstration, but an enemy, that'll get you going. I was always thrilled to see those things. Even the time I flew through one of them. That's right. I was flying a Cobra gunship out in Laos, and I noticed a lot of explosions down below. And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm flying through an arc light. Thank goodness for the big sky, small aircraft concept. Made it through safely. Another aircraft the Air Force would put on demonstrations for my benefit was one of my favorites, the old AC-47Ds. You would probably know one of them as a DC-3. Outstanding aircraft. Did a lot of service for our country. Over in Vietnam, they decided to try something new with it, and that was side-firing machine guns. They would mount 3 machine guns on the side of an AC-47D and fly those and bank them over to a steep bank and unload on the enemy down below. It was a tremendous sight to see one of those strikes. They made a strange sound when those 3 miniguns would cut loose. It always reminded me of drunken college students throwing up when they drank too much at a beer bust. The VC down below did not think it was funny. If they could find the enemy down there at the right place at the right time and have one of those AC-47Ds unload on them, it was not a laughing matter for them. I got such a kick out of watching those aircraft unload on the enemy, I decided to share a story with you about them that I hope you will find it as interesting as I do. The title of the story is, Before the AC-130, the Air Force had another fearsome gunship. The story was written by Logan Nye for We Are the Mighty. I found it on the Business Insider website. I encourage you to go over to the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com, episode 1870, and there you will see a picture of one of these magnificent airplanes sitting at an airfield in South Vietnam. There will also be a picture of the 3 machine guns mounted inside the aircraft. They were very impressive. Let's take a look at what Logan Nye had to say about this aircraft. Dateline, We Are the Mighty website. The C-47 fulfilled a number of roles in World War II and Korea. It was a supply plane, a plane for dropping paratroopers, and a tow for gliders. But it was in the Vietnam War that the Goonie Bird would get its greatest mission, flying 3 7.62 millimeter miniguns through the night to devastate North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces. A note here. Many times I would see the aircraft flying around at night, shooting those miniguns. It looked like a fire hose spraying out, with that steady fire going down there, and I often wondered, do they really know what they're shooting at? I hope so. If they did know what they were firing at, and it was the enemy, it would be very effective. If not, all it did was provide overtime hours for the people working at the munitions factories back at the arsenals in America. Hopefully they did know what they were shooting at. It's what you would call an area weapon. Continuing with the story. The idea for a side-firing gunship had been floating around military circles since at least 1926. In fact, the technique had been tested successfully in 1927 when First Lieutenant Fred Nelson flew a DH-4 with a mounted .30 caliber machine gun and destroyed a target on the ground. I bet he was treated just like Billy Mitchell, who came up with a new idea. After he destroyed the target with that machine gun on his DH-4, probably the higher-up said, "It'll never work." Pardon me for being a cynic. Continuing. But the Army Air Corps and the Army Air Forces never came around to the idea. Finally, it was all the way up to 1963 before the idea of a side-firing aircraft got another serious test. A C-130B modified with gun sights and a minigun was successful in early tests, and the experiment was repeated with the C-47. Later on, they started arming C-130s with 105 millimeter howitzers, firing out the side in a rapid-fire mode. That really laid the hurt on them. Unfortunately, by that time, the NVA were a little more sophisticated with their anti-aircraft systems and would knock those C-130s down like flies. Continuing with the story, the C-47 performed swimmingly well, whatever that means, and Air Force leader General Curtis LeMay approved the modifications of 2 planes in 1964. The final combat variant of the AC-47 consisted of the cargo plane with 3, count them, 3, 7.62 millimeter miniguns mounted on the left side, 2 in the modified portholes near the cargo door, and 1 in the cargo door itself. The triggers for the 3 guns were connected to a button in the pilot's compartment. When you go over to the website and look at a picture of that C-47 sitting at the airport, you will notice that those guns firing out the side go dangerously close to the wing. You just have to hope that the crewmen aim those guns correctly. Otherwise, you could very easily shoot your wing off. Continuing. The pilots would take off with a 7-man crew and seek out small bases and villages under fire by North Vietnamese forces. When fighting popped off, the crew would drop flares out of the open door and the pilot would fly a racetrack pattern over the target, pouring fire on it the whole time. If the threat was too large for the AC-47, the flares it dropped would light up the target for follow-on fighters. The AC-47 would stay in the area directing the attacks by other aircraft. The AC-47, dubbed Puff the Magic Dragon by an officer who saw it at work, was so effective that the Air Force launched Project Gunship II, a program which resulted in the AC-130 still in service today. A number of AC-47 pilots and crews were cited for bravery while serving aboard the plane, including Medal of Honor recipient Sergeant John L. Levitow. Levitow was on an AC-47 that was struck by a mortar round. Let me repeat that. Levitow was on an AC-47 that was struck by a mortar round. If you're flying in an AC-47 and you get struck by a mortar round in the air, I think that would be similar to winning the jackpot lottery. It seems like if an AC-47 was flying in the night, a mortar round was fired, the VC got lucky, and it hit that aircraft, wouldn't the aircraft blow up? That's what mortar rounds do. They explode. But not in this case. Reading further, though he was peppered by approximately 40 pieces of shrapnel in the blast, he noticed that a flare activated by another crew member just before the blast was rolling around the cargo area. The flare had yet to fully ignite, but it was only a matter of time before it would, possibly killing the crew on its own and almost certainly causing the cargo hold of ammunition to go off. Don't you just hate it when that happens? Levitow crawled to the flare, held the burning implement against his already wounded body, and moved to the door with it. He was able to throw it out just before the flare ignited. I would have to say the award of the Medal of Honor to John L. Levitow in that case was well earned. Sounds like they survived to fight another night. That's something else. They always seem to use these aircraft at night. There you have the story of the U.S. Air Force Douglas AC-47D in action in Vietnam. That aircraft was just another in the array of aircraft used by our Air Force, Navy, and Marines in Vietnam. It was an amazing thing, and thank goodness I was in the right state of mind to observe the whole thing for 2 years. It was a very interesting experience, and the AC-47D helped make it even more interesting. That's the story of the Air Force's AC-47D. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Mac Payne closing out episode 1870 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for coming to listen to these stories. You are cordially invited to return again soon and often to listen to more that will be coming your way on this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?